Well, I don't do video.
3, 2, 1.
Me neither. Okay. Oh, what is that, my Instagram page?
Right, this is Jace coming to you live, San Diego Comic-Con, the 50th iteration. I'm here with a very special guest, the director of a soon-to-be blockbuster film, Bloodshot, Dave Wilson. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, my pleasure. Happy to be here.
Yeah, happy to be here too. Joseph Medina, LRM Online, sister site. You know, we're friends. We know each other. We're cool. Yeah, very happy to have you on this show to talk about all sorts of things, not just Bloodshot. Your extensive career. You have done a lot of things, a lot of it in VFX and all of that. You've worked with Tim Miller and Blur Studios. You've done a lot of video game cinematic trailers and stuff. So, do you want to start with Bloodshot? I have a lot of questions about everything, but
sure. Let's start with Bloodshot. Let me ask you this, Dave. How did you get involved in the project?
I got the script sent to me, and it was funny. I was in the middle of developing another film at the time, and I was sort of heads down in that, and I got the script and I read it, and the truth is, like, when you get a script, like, as a first-time filmmaker, no one really wants to hear your opinions on the script. They just want you to fucking shoot it, right?
Yeah.
And but there was, you know, and I sort of didn't want to fall in love with it because I was developing this other film at the time that was about to go. And then I read the script for Bloodshot, and there was this sort of thematic core at the center of it that I really loved. And I pitched them on a version of the film that was a little different to that and required some rewrite, but ultimately, like, the core of what I thought was unique about the film was then. Very surprisingly, when I pitched them, like, basically a big rewrite of the movie, like, they were like, that sounds amazing, let's do it. Which is great. I mean, it was like the first opportunity for me to build something almost from the ground up with, you know, a great partner in Dinesh from Valiant and original film, and Eric Heiserer was the writer at the time. And Arrival hadn't come out yet, which obviously was huge for Eric, but, you know, we got to put that script together, and that was, to me, what was exciting about it. But look, I was a fan of the comics too, but you need to, like, making a movie at that scale is, see, we even get some fanfare.
Yeah, awesome. Everyone's excited for Bloodshot.
Do you think Disney's going to try to copyright claim this because of the music playing in the background?
Bloodshot Parade.
You guys, this is very well orchestrated. But they, you know, I was a big fan of the comics, and what attracted me most about it was, like, is I always felt like Valiant found, especially on the sort of Bloodshot side of the universe, found this technological grounding to their character, right, in technology. And I loved that because I'm a massive nerd, so the idea that there was a sort of grounding foundation to his power sets and that world and how they were going about it was what really intrigued me. And then that, in conjunction with the idea that Bloodshot is always being manipulated, and there's this aspect of you know, who we are in a world rampant with technology that is often defining our choices for us. All of that was a very sort of topical and interesting aspect of the character, and obviously, like, I'm a big visual filmmaker too, so the action and the sort of, you know, the level of violence that Bloodshot is known for was also, like, all those things combined was just too much to ignore. Like, it was, I was in. From the minute they were, like, willing to jump into the version I was excited about, we were off.
Was there any part of you that wanted to do this in animated form?
You know, it's funny, like, I always wanted to, live action was this is going to be a long tangential story, so bear with me, but I always wanted to do what I'm like now, like filming. But in the 90s in South Africa, where I grew up, I didn't have any money and film was expensive, and I met Shalter Copley, who's the star of District 9 and many films since then. Shalter was a producer when I knew him. It wasn't even like, and he introduced me to Neil Blomkamp's little short films that he was doing, which were all animated at the time. Like, not the one that everyone's seen online, like Alive in Joburg. Neil was, like, Toy Story had barely come out, and Neil was doing these all animated, like, robots killing robots, like, animated short films, and I was like, these are fucking amazing. Like, and so, like, a 20-year, like, deep dive into animation began for me, but it was never about, like, the medium. I always feel like you choose your story, and then you choose the medium that best fits that story.
Right.
And I, like, there's just too much in Bloodshot for me that's inherently like emotional. Not that you can't do that in an animated series, but or feature. But I felt like the medium best suited for this was live action. But there's a massive visual effects component to it too. So it's in a way it's a hybrid between the two. But no, there was never a doubt in my mind that this was a live action feature.
Right.
Well, when you talk about doing it as live action, and you can show emotion, and there's so much to it, but then you also have the kind of the added challenge that this is hopefully the first of several Valiant movies. So
hopefully, yeah.
You're really creating the visual look for an entire universe. So that must be a challenge, but it also must be exciting for you to kind of establish this universe.
Yeah, look, I mean, for not just visually, but also tonally and but it's interesting in that, I would actually like there to be a sort of more definitive like line between what Harbinger is and what Bloodshot is, and then when there's a crossover, it feels like two sort of separate worlds have collided. At least, like, look, I'm like by any means the architect of how it'll all come together, but there was the sort of overriding mandate for me in terms of defining what Bloodshot was like Marvel certainly has their huge swath of the market, and DC has carved theirs out, and visually I just wanted to make something that was a little more look, I grew up like loving sort of the action movies of Tony Scott when I was young, and they always felt like it had this visceral, immersive, energetic quality to them that is it's not presentational by any means. It feels like you're there, and Tony was great about combining action and heart and drama into sort of one story, and that was my kind of guiding principle for a lot of the choices that I made and even some of the team that we put together for the film comes from Tony's or like old crews and stuff like that, because just a big fan of what he was doing, back even like Top Gun and True Romance and Enemy of the State and Domino, and like they were all just like Spy Game. They're these really great sort of visceral rides, and I felt like it was a nice compliment to what I wanted sort of the Bloodshot look and feel to be.
Yeah, and obviously the star of the film, Vin Diesel, he's got a weight to him in his roles. So
yes.
Was that fun to play with, to bring some like depth, some groundedness to the character?
Yeah, look, Vin certainly has like, I don't know if you know this, but Vin has a twin brother, and he's a huge Bloodshot fan. So I feel like, and we had an incredible pitch. This is another long tangent, but a fabulous pitch meeting with Vin when he first came down. He brought his 9-year-old son at the time, and we had all the artwork up and like the Bloodshot and the comics and the statues and everything was in the room. And when we were leaving, like the meeting, like his son like sort of tagged him on the back of his shirt and was like, "Dad, I really want you to be Bloodshot." And I was like, "Oh, yeah. We are off to the races."
It's like good.
But between, I think, and so I think both of them, like, he was wedged between his son who wanted to see, like, the universe brought to life, and his brother who was already a huge fan. He was like, this is special. But Vin has this wonderful, like, a sort of unapologetic, I am who I am persona to who he is that I felt like was so great for the character, especially to someone, and I think what was exciting about it to Vin and what I pitched to him is he is always playing, well, not always, but most of the, like with Dom and with Xavier, he's always playing a character that is one step ahead of everyone else, right? He's always like the alpha male. He knows, like he's got the plan, right? And there was an amazing quality to Bloodshot, who sort of at some point in the feature, and in the books, he's being manipulated, and he's not one step ahead. He's actually scrambling to get ahead of the characters in the comics that are sort of who know more than he does. And I think it was that sort of vulnerability that actually appealed to him. And then he finds himself in and who he is and who he's going to be. And I think all those elements of being able to step a little outside of that sort of comfort zone was appealing to him. But at the same time, yes, it's almost like like he's so confident and so larger than life that I feel like that persona of confidence is just always oozing out of him. So it was wonderful to see him, be a little, like, especially in the beginning of the film when he's like the sort of world is the rug's pulled out from underneath him a little bit in terms of who he is. It's nice to see Vin playing with that. It was a fun experience. But I mean, it's amazing. Like, we filmed in South Africa, and we were on this fishing pier one day in the middle of nowhere, and there were 3 kids swimming in the harbor in like their underwear. I don't even know how they afford to go to the movie theater, right? And they were like pointing at him, and they were like, "Oh my God, there's Vin Diesel!" And you were like, and he's just like a larger than life legend to them, like, and it's amazing. And I think part of that is because he's very much like, this is who I am, and they love him for it. Like, he doesn't apologize. Like, he's a very earnest character, and I think so from the outset when we started making the film with him, that was a sort of perfect, what I felt like is one of the qualities that really embodies Bloodshot.
So you're finishing up post-production now.
Yep.
The final tweaks. So you've seen it. You've seen the story come to life.
Many times.
How close? I know it's always impossible as a creator to get 100% of the vision that you see in your head, but how close did you come?
Filmmaking is all about adapting to an ever-changing environment, right? You put your battle plan out there, and then you set out to make the movie, and then you adapt, right? Because there's always a curveball, there's always something going wrong or something going right, and then you want to latch onto that and run with it, right? So I would say, like, there were a few key tenets that I was like, we gotta hit these notes, otherwise we're fucked. And we hit them all, like, and out the park. In some cases, there was a few look, I mean, Vin's audience and the Bloodshot character, I wanted to make sure, like, the concept of a character grappling with who he is and who he thought he was and who he's going to be, was that we had to hit. There's a sort of, and then obviously the action and the violence and the spectacle. Like, those were I was like, we have to hit these 2 things. If we don't, like, I'm not sure what we're making, right? And both of those we knocked out the park. There are many set pieces in the film, but there are 2 big action set pieces. One was like very, very practical, and the other is like heavy with visual effects. And when we screened the first audience preview, which is terrifying, by the way, like they played like gangbusters, and I was like, okay, like, you can check that box. We nailed that. And then there was but the biggest, like, what really made me happy, there's a big emotional beat in the film that is sort of, the real gut puncher of the movie. And, you think you've got it when you filmed it and you see it for the first time in your cut, and you're like, I think it's awesome. But you never really know until there's 400 people sitting in a movie theater. And, like, there's one moment, without giving it away, where something happens, and you could hear the whole audience, like, visibly gasp at what just happened, and I was like, oh, thank fucking God. Because if it didn't happen, like, it would only matter, like, a little bit, but like it's really that moment where he realizes, like, what's been going on, and it played great. So yeah.
Going from mostly animation to live action, were there any challenges that came that were unexpected, or were you exposed enough to the world of it through your work on other movies to see most of it coming?
I would say, the animation, like, directing an animation is like directing in slow motion. Like, you give a note, and then a week later it manifests itself into whatever you asked for, if you're lucky. Live action is like this: you plan as much as you can, and then you throw the dice and you just fucking hold on, right? And because it's all coming real time. But that is the best part about it. Like, there is, it's like there's spontaneous decisions. There's what happens on set that drives, like I said, you're constantly adapting. But no, I think the biggest thing for me, it was not just that I've directed in animation, but it was actually Blur itself that I felt. The production company that Tim Miller and I worked at, Tim still owns, both he and I were the creative directors there, and the managing of, like, the 150 like staff that we have there, that to me was more what because we weren't just, directing an animated feature is one thing, but like when you're sort of running the sort of creative outlet of the company, you're constantly bouncing between different questions and people and managing, and it's like it's everything. You're managing people and projects, and questions are being fired at you every minute of every day. And that to me was more the experience of making the feature than simply directing like an animated spot. The company itself demands more attention than like an individual commercial game trailer that we've been doing. But it's the same thing. Like ultimately, you're telling a story, and the thing that was most, and this is why it's great to have like your writer and your producing partners on set with you, is that inevitably as the director you sort of you get into the weeds of a scene you're shooting, and it requires someone sort of yanking you up by the sort of by the shirt collar to say like keep an eye on the bigger picture. And that to me is important, because everything we're doing at Blur is usually like 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and this is a feature-length film. So it's just a reminder to sort of pull your head out from the weeds and take a broader look.
So you also did some work on Terminator: Dark Fate, correct? And how was the timetable?
I didn't personally, but Blur is.
Blur did. Oh, okay. I apologize. So.
Because they were running concurrently.
That's what I was wondering, because I saw that your Blur was attached to it, and I was curious if you were splitting your time between one project or another, if that was working.
No, it's funny. Like Tim, Jeff Fowler, and I. Jeff's directing the Sonic the Hedgehog film. We literally share one desk at Blur together, and in the space of 1 month, we all evaporated to go and make our movies. Like it's pretty crazy. Like we've all been coming to Comic-Con for 15 years together. Tim for longer, but when I joined Blur in like 2002, and it's more than 15 years now. But we've all been coming together, and the only year we haven't come together was last year, because Tim was shooting Dark Fate, Jeff was shooting Sonic, and I was off doing Bloodshot. So we all sort of dispersed. Blur has been heavily involved in Dark Fate. I know they did previs, and they're doing some visual effects for some sequences too. The same with Sonic. They did like an initial test for that, and I think they worked on some of the previs too.
Do you guys
have a crossover though?
The crossover between
Bloodshot and Sonic.
That would be interesting to see. Do the three of you ever talk to each other and give each other advice on filmmaking,
advice,
since you all kind of come from the same background?
Would be more appropriate. Yes, all the time. We've all seen each other's films. In fact, I haven't seen Terminator. I'm hopefully going to go and see it next week. I've just been busy. When Jeff went to watch it, we were previewing our film, so I couldn't make it. But yeah, look, I mean, I think you want to invite as many opinions as you can. I'm certainly not like there's no version where my ego gets in the way of the movie being the best it can be, right? And given it's my first film, I have no bar of where I should or shouldn't be at any point in the process. So when we were 5 weeks into my director's cut, Tim came in, Joe Russo from Endgame, obviously he came in, and it was just fabulous to have someone as seasoned as Joe to sit in the room and go, this is what I like, this is and just to sort of walk you through the process of like how the rest of you making this movie will go, which I mean like to a first-time filmmaker, that's gold. It gives you really boosts your confidence. It makes you feel like, okay, I'm not horribly fucking this up, and so like yes, but Jeff is one of my best friends. And he started a week later after me at Blur, well now 16 years ago, right? So I've known him since that day, and we would Skype on the weekends when we were filming and sort of share like how it was going. It's great. It's nice to know, because directing ultimately is a sort of isolated job. You sit there and questions are thrown at you, and you have to make decisions, and you don't really get to expose your vulnerability or your fears. Well, you could, I guess. I don't think it would go very well. But, so it's nice to have friends that you can talk to and be like, Jesus, what the fuck happened today?
Right.
And they can be like, oh, the same thing. Don't worry about it. Like I remember, it's always financially challenging to make these films. And I remember calling Tim and being like, man, I can't seem to make this. And he's like, trust me, but like mine's a $175 million movie. I'm having the same problem.
Yeah. Do you remember any specific thoughts or advice any of your friends gave with the director's cut of the movie for Bloodshot? Obviously, can't get too specific by ruining anything.
I think I remember Joe saying lean into the sincerity of it. The sort of tone of a film is often the hardest thing to find, and and like conversely the most important, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Joe had just like watched it, and I think like we talked about tone and music and sincerity of the film and all that sort of thing, and that sort of stuck with me for a while. But it was just, I'm thinking back now. I think more than anything, like just, I remember like breathing a big sigh of relief when Joe was like, "It's great, you're on the right track, just keep doing what you're doing, you're gonna be fine," right? Which was nice because like that's all you really want to hear is that like this is exactly where you need to be. And it was same sort of milestones all the way through, the same with the audience preview. Like it's just like, it's great to know you're on the on you see, because you don't know, like it's the first time you've walked down this path and you're not quite sure, if you've taken a wrong turn one way or the other. So more than anything, just the assurance that just keep going, like, and it was not one thing he told me about my film, but more everything he told me about the process of that you're going to walk through, that I felt was the most invaluable part to me.
Mm-hmm. What of your other projects that you've worked on do you feel maybe you learned some lessons that you applied to Bloodshot? Is there anything in particular? Yeah, like I said, I feel like it's not really a singular process more than just how I like to. I feel like you hire, like you build a crew around you, right? Your DP, your production designer, your line producer, all these people that are going to help you make this film, like set designers and art directors and your stunt coordinators and your visual effects supervisor, and you put them all in the room with you, and then you elicit their opinions all throughout the process, right? And I think and this came from Blur too, is like you need to leave people enough freedom to make it their own. It was, in a way, like the same. There's this thematic concept in Bloodshot, the sort of illusion of choice in a technologically advanced society, and I feel like people are invested in something when they personally feel like they have agency in the final product, right? When they feel like, I can make a difference here. If you're just telling them to push buttons, there's nothing left for them to do, right? And I think, and that came from Blur, and seeing that the best I could get out of my teams in that situation was always just like very clearly sort of illustrate what I wanted to do, and then leave them enough to make it theirs too, because I feel like that's when everything works the best. Is like people don't want to, like, they're all incredibly talented people in the pinnacle of like sort of movie making in terms of like their creative skill set. So you have to leave enough for them to feel invested in it, and that to me was by far like over and above like how to frame and how to light and where to move and like all those things. Like those are all small little things. For me, like it's the people that make the films great, and so the more you can get them invested in it. In fact, like so much so that I did this presentation for Bloodshot that because I wanted to be hyper clear about what my vision was, and I wanted people to get excited about it. And I filmed myself. It was the same presentation I gave Tom Rothman, who runs Sonnie. And I was like, fuck it, I'm just going to record myself giving this so that I can get people excited about what the film is. This little 15-minute presentation with concept art and themes and everything like that. And I sent it to everybody who came onto the movie, because, like, and then from there, expecting them to be like, that's the worst version of the movie. Now help me make it better. And that was like by far the thing that I felt like I had been doing at Blur that I took with me, that I wanted to make this movie.
Love, Death, and Robots.
Right.
That's a weird show. It's pretty cool. It's really, it has a very specific flair to it. Obviously, different stories, each one, different animation styles. You did the first one. How does something like that come together? How did you get involved in that? And what were your thoughts going into it? Like, what did they say they wanted from you, and how did you deliver?
Right. It's not the first one. It's only the first one if your viewing habits care. I didn't realize. I found this out the hard way myself. Like,
what?
So obviously, if you like that sort of, no, I'm just kidding. I'm not kidding. They are. I found this out because I told a friend of mine, an author. I was like, hey, check out this new show, Love, Death, and Robots. I did the pilot, right?
Yeah.
And then he called me, and I could hear he was like, yeah, like, oh, it was cool. And I'm like, oh, yeah. And then he started talking about it. I was like, wait a second, that's like, what was it called? And he was like, oh, it was called something. I'm like, that's not mine. And he's like, oh, really? No. He was like, I did this one called Sonnie's Edge. He's like, oh, I love that one. And I was like, but that was the third one I watched. And so depending on, I guess, what you may have watched before, like it shuffles the order.
That's creepy.
I
That's weird. Technology.
So it came about, like, honestly, Tim had wanted to make an adult sort of anthology series forever with David Fincher. Like, they had been tooling around with the idea initially as a feature years ago. And then when Deadpool was a big success, David was like, let's try that animated thing again. And Netflix was in. Like, they were like, this is how much money we'll give you. Like, do whatever you want. So Tim curated a bunch of, short stories, and one of them was by an author I love, Peter F. Hamilton, who wrote a short story for Sonnie's Edge. But he wrote like 25 years ago. And I hadn't read the short, but I'd read Peter's. He wrote this epic, sprawling like science fiction book series called the Night's Dawn trilogy, and a lot of like the technology and the affinity links and all that stuff that's in Sonnie's comes from those books too. And I read the short and the script. It was the first. Tim had a stack of them. He was like, pick one, and direct one with us here at Blur. But Sonnie's was the first one I read, and I was like, this is awesome. I'm in. And then a year-long process. Those things don't go quickly. A year-long process to make Sonnie's began, but it was arguably the most freedom I've ever had to direct anything. Like, Tim and I are good friends, and we batted around some notes on the script, and then when he saw the preview, like the animatics, he had some notes, but by and large, it was just left to my own devices. Which I must say, like, it's pretty incredible just to have like the words on a page, and then all those designs and Sonnie and the creatures and the world and everything like that. A lot of that is just from my head, and it's amazing. Because I've been to Comic-Con for years, and I've seen like cosplay of characters that I've directed a lot of Star Wars commercials and Halo, and there are certainly characters that we brought to life in those trailers and in those cinematics, but I'm still standing on like the shoulders of those IPs, right? And but this time, like, those characters never existed. That world never existed outside of Peter's short until we put it into Sonnie's Edge and into that series. So to see people tattooing those characters onto them or cosplaying, like, is wild.
Right.
Like, I mean, it's just amazing to me that like they love them that much that they're willing to sort of ink them on their bodies in perpetuity.
Are you going to be involved in season 2 at all?
Hopefully, we have already started talking about. There was a short I love, like when we were originally talking about like the feature anthology series. There was a short in that selection that I adored. I can't say what it is, and if the timing works, I would absolutely do it again. It's a long process. Obviously, it takes a year, so it's just all about timing and what's next.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any other projects that we should be? I mean, obviously you're still.
I do.
Deep in
Two very exciting ones that I can't. One is a TV series that I'm very, very excited about, and another is a feature. They're both based on books, and if you watch any other interviews, you'll be able to figure out who the author is. Like, I'm a big grounded science fact sort of guy. And there's an author I love whose books I've been chasing for years. I don't want to say anything because literally these deals just all happened like in the last week, and I'm not sure what I'm allowed or not allowed to say yet. But those will take a while. Book development is usually takes a bit of time, but they are incredible. Like, one is a sort of sprawling near future like. Science fiction series, and the other is very grounded and far more like popcorn ride. I'm being very ambiguous here because I'm going to get in trouble, so I think I'll stop talking.
Okay, so not to go back too far, I'm going to go back far because I'm just curious. You mentioned you met Charlton Copley, you got involved with Neil Blomkamp and all that. So that's how your journey in VFX began. Did you imagine when you got into that it would begin this years-long journey that would have you going through video games and all that?
I just loved, like, there was an aspect of me that loved entertaining, right? And I knew I could personally never fucking do it. I didn't want to be in front of a camera. But I loved all, like, I remember, like, but technology has always been something that I've been fascinated in. I remember like being 8 years old and wanting a computer in like, I don't know what it was, like 85 or whatever. My parents were so terrified of what that thing was. It was in their bedroom because they were always wanted to keep an eye on me. But like games and comics and science fiction and computers and like all of that I loved, but I love the movies more than anything, right? But it was always like, I'm in South Africa in like the fucking 90s when I was trying to like discover all that stuff. I remember like you couldn't even get like I'd found copies of like 3D Studio Max and Lightwave but like there was no schools or anyone to teach you that shit. So like you would order a book from Amazon and like 3 months later it would arrive, like if it actually ever made it to your doorstep. But I kind of wanted to just to tell stories. That was about it. And then like Sholto and Neil, and Neil had left, by the way. He just left behind this like treasure trove of animation. And he'd left for the Vancouver Film School. Like Neil was like, he had these. Neil was a big like Michael Bay fan and Jerry Bruckheimer, and like a lot of his visual effects reels were like CG versions of like their movies, and it was from shots from their movies, and I was just like enamored by what he was able to create. So I just started tinkering around in what he had been doing, and then Sholto and I started a company together, and then we started the visual effects company together, and I just sort of went down this rabbit hole of animation. The most rewarding thing about it for me was I could do it all by myself. Like I could literally I immersed myself in I would day and night sit in a little dark room somewhere making animations, and I could do it all by myself. Like that was the hard part about film, is that you needed money and crews and people to go and do that. It wasn't like you could just pick up an iPhone and go and shoot something. And so I was able to tell these little stories all by myself. It took a hell of a long time, but it was an outlet for those stories I wanted to tell. And then at some point, Tim found my work online and was like, "Come out to Blur," and I did, and that's sort of where the journey all started.
Weird question. Any desire to do stop motion?
It's funny. I did do some stop motion way back when. It was just it was one of the ways like an outlet for animation, and I love it. I'm a big fan of some of the work like Burton was doing too. Like it's beautiful, and I loved model making when I was a kid too. But it was just, I prefer the pace at which sort of films are live action films are made over stop motion. But there's no Again, it all just depends on the story, right? If there was a great story that was wanting to be told in that medium, I would absolutely do it. Absolutely. I love the stuff Aardman was doing. All that stuff is awesome. But I just I don't have a story that suits that medium. So, if there was, I'd be in, sure.
Well, one of the things that I love about sitting here and chatting with you, Dave, is the fact you've been coming to Comic-Con for so long.
Yeah.
You've taken this journey, but you're really still one of us. And so I really hope that the listeners and the viewers go check out Bloodshot, check out your show on Netflix.
Thank you.
And keep you're one to watch. You've been doing it a long time, but I think you still have
Oh look, I feel like I've just started.
Right?
Yeah. No, don't get me wrong. And I love what we've been doing, but yes, this is a stage unlike any other. So I'm very, very, very excited. And there's just so much out there. There are so many stories to be told, and comics and books, and honestly, it's not a matter of what do I want to tell. It's just what do I want to tell next.
Right.
Because it's such a wealth of great stories out there to pull from that it's hard, because whatever it is that we do next, that's 2-3 years of your life, and you kind of and it's even hard to what IP you will latch onto, because the truth, if you've got 3 or 4 things in development, and whatever that third or fourth thing is could wait a decade. Mm-hmm. So it's very nerve-wracking to say I want to do that, because it's a sort of catch-22. It could go next. It could be 5 years from now, and authors are my rock stars. So like I don't want to take a comic book off the market or a novel off the market, like in terms of development, if I'm not absolutely serious. Like that's what I want to do, because I don't want those guys sitting around like wondering what's happened to their property that's been off the market for like a decade.
One of my friends said something recently. He says, you never realize how old you are until you start thinking of time in terms of movies being made, because just how long it takes for it to happen. I just can't believe just the cycles that we've seen happen as we've been covering this stuff, and I'm sure you feel the same way from your perspective as well.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's like, and it's this sort of time vacuum right now, because like it's like everything happens so quickly that you sort of look up and you're like, Jesus, 2 years have gone by. But for sure, I think honestly, like I remember back to a movie and it feels like yesterday, and then I'm like, oh wow, that was 20 years ago, and I'm like, oh. But yes, I agree.
Yeah.
Any other questions, Joseph?
No, I think we're good on that note. Like, thank you so much for your time. Like,
No, my pleasure, guys.
definitely interested in checking out Bloodshot and all the work that you've done. It's really inspirational. I'm really interested to see what you do beyond that as well. I want to see Bloodshot take off, but even if it does, I want to see what happens the other projects that you're talking about. If those are the ones that are able to catch, or if those are the ones that get pushed in favor of a sequel to Bloodshot and all that. So I'm really curious to see what's down the road for you.
Yeah, and we also want to ask any of our listeners want to follow your work online. When you are able to start talking about these other projects, where's the best place to get news about what you're doing?
Oh man, my social media presence is horrific. Dinesh and my manager are always like, I honestly have no idea. I am hoping in the future that. Oh, what is that? My Instagram page? What do I read out?
David.
Oh, Dave. Yeah. So I'm on Instagram at David SF. See, I don't even know my fucking Instagram now. Yeah, David SF Wilson. That's me on Instagram. And I just started posting stuff from Sonnie's and Bloodshot, but like I'm working with folks to sort of up my social
game.
Yes. I'm just like I'm not that guy. So, but I'm hoping, yes, I will start sort of feeding things. And it's part of why we're doing this too, is that and Vin is so much better than I am. It's intimidating when he grabs you on set and he's like, here we go, and you realize you're about to post to like 50 million people. But yeah, look, I'm definitely going to find ways to get what I'm doing out there. I realize it's not just important to create this stuff, but it's important to get it out there, which is why I'm so grateful that you guys could have me.
Yeah, well, your love of story is so obvious, and I think story is what connects us all.
Sure.
And so we really want to share the work that you're doing, and the way that we can do that these days is with social media. So I'll be sure and put a link to Dave's Instagram in the show notes for the podcast. We can probably throw it on.
Do the same thing in the video and stuff and the other podcasts that we posted too. So we're going all over the place. The thing's going viral.
All right, well, thanks a lot, Dave. It was a
No,
real
my
pleasure.
pleasure. Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.